Last of Us Part 2 Evilness Tier List. I did one for Part 1. Check that out. Starting with where Abby from The Last of Us Part 2 ranks on the Evilness tier list. First off, let's talk about Abby's introduction to the story. Right from the get-go, she makes quite an impression with her actions towards a beloved character. It's a moment that shocked many players and set the tone for her role in the game. While her motivations are explained later, that initial impact is hard to shake off. Throughout the game, we see Abby make some pretty tough choices. She's not afraid to go against her own group if it means achieving her goals. This kind of single-minded determination can come across as pretty ruthless, especially when it affects characters we've grown to care about. Now, it's worth noting that The Last of Us Part 2 does a great job of showing different perspectives. We get to see Abby's backstory and understand why she acts the way she does. But even with this context, some of her actions are hard to justify. The game challenges us to empathize with her, but also presents situations where her choices can be seen as crossing moral lines. One thing that pushes Abby up the Evilness tier list is the apparent lack of remorse she shows for certain actions. While she does show growth and change throughout the story, there are moments where her commitment to her path seems to overshadow any sense of regret or second-guessing. It's also interesting to consider how Abby's actions compare to other characters in the game. In a world as harsh as The Last of Us, where survival often requires brutal decisions, Abby still manages to stand out. Evil tier. Alright, let's keep this train rolling with more characters. Let's start with Jerry. Now, this dude's got a complex story that puts him in a morally gray area. As Abby's dad and the head surgeon for the Fireflies, Jerry was all set to perform that fateful operation on Ellie. On one hand, he's trying to save humanity. Noble cause, right? But on the flip side, he's ready to sacrifice a young girl without her consent. That's where things get a bit sketchy. Jerry's decision to go ahead with the operation, knowing it would kill Ellie, is what lands him in the somewhat evil tier. He's not cackling in a dark lair or anything, but he's making some pretty heavy choices that not everyone can get behind. It's that classic do the ends justify the means dilemma, and Jerry's firmly in the yes camp. But let's not forget, Jerry's also a loving father and a brilliant doctor. He's not all bad, just caught in an impossible situation. His actions set off a chain of events that shape the entire story. So while he might not be top-tier evil, he's definitely stirring the pot. Now, let's switch gears and talk about Dena. Our girl Dena is chilling in neutral territory, and for good reason. Throughout the game, Dena's mostly just trying to survive and protect the people she cares about. She's not out for revenge or making any morally questionable choices. She's just doing her best in a world gone to hell. Dena's loyalty to Ellie is a big part of her character. She sticks by Ellie's side through thick and thin, even when things get dangerous. But she's also not afraid to call Ellie out when she thinks she's going too far. That balance is what keeps her firmly in the neutral zone. What's cool about Dena is that she brings some much-needed lightness to the game. Her jokes and banter with Ellie give us a break from all the intensity. She's just a regular person trying to find some happiness in a messed-up world, and it's hard not to root for her. So there you have it, Jerry in the somewhat evil tier for his morally ambiguous decisions, and Dena holding it down in neutral. It just goes to show that in The Last of Us, nobody's purely good or evil. Everyone's just trying to navigate a brutal world the best they can.
Next, Ellie. She is going to somewhat evil tier list. She goes through a great character development arc and does a 360. In Part 2, she is more calculating and strategic, but also very cold. She hasn't completely lost her innocence, but we can for sure say it faded away somewhat. Ellie's moral compass is still better many characters, but she is now ready to look far away from the usual lines of action. Somewhat evil.
Now, we've got Isaac Dixon, the leader of the Washington Liberation Front, aka the WLF. Now, this dude's earned himself a spot in the devil tier, and it's not hard to see why. Isaac's running his militia with an iron fist, and he's not exactly winning any humanitarian awards.
What pushes Isaac into the devilish territory is his ruthless approach to, well, pretty much everything. This guy's all about maintaining control through fear and violence. He's got no problem ordering executions, torturing prisoners, or sending his people on suicide missions. Remember how he treated Yara and Lev? Yeah, not exactly winning any Leader of the Year awards there. But what really cements Isaac's place in the devil tier is his absolute lack of compromise. In his mind, it's all black and white. You're either with the WLF or you're the enemy. There's no middle ground, no room for mercy. It's this kind of extremist thinking that makes Isaac a truly terrifying antagonist. Now let's cool things down a bit and talk about Jesse. This dude's chilling in the neutral zone, and for good reason. Jesse's like that friend who's always got your back, no questions asked. Jesse lands in neutral territory because he's not out there trying to change the world or get revenge. He's just a solid guy trying to do right by his friends and community. When Ellie and Dena take off for Seattle, Jesse doesn't hesitate to follow, not because he's got a bone to pick, but because he wants to make sure they're safe. In a world where everyone seems to be driven by extreme emotions, Jesse's the voice of reason. He's willing to help Ellie, but he also knows when to draw the line. He's not afraid to call out risky behavior or suggest a more measured approach. Jesse's also got this admirable sense of duty. He takes his responsibilities in Jackson seriously, and he extends that same loyalty to his friends. He's not trying to be a hero or a villain. He's just being Jesse, and that's what makes him such a grounding presence in the game. Joel, oh Joel. Our gruff, guitar-strumming smuggler finds himself in the evil tier this time around. Now, before you grab your pitchforks, hear me out. In Part 2, we're seeing Joel through a new lens, the consequences of his actions at the end of the first game. From this perspective, Joel's decision to save Ellie takes on a darker shade. He robbed humanity of a potential cure, leaving a trail of bodies in his wake. It's a classic case of the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Sure, he saved Ellie, but at what cost? The ripple effect of his choice set off a chain reaction of violence and revenge that engulfed everyone around him. But here's the kicker. Joel doesn't seem to regret it. Even knowing the price, he'd do it all again. There's something almost chilling about that level of dedication. It's a reminder that even the most loving acts can have devastating consequences. Now let's flip the script and talk about Lev, our resident good guy. This kid's like a beacon of hope in the midst of all the chaos and carnage of Part 2. Lev's journey is all about staying true to himself, even when the whole world seems to be against him. Despite being raised in a cult, Lev manages to break free from their toxic beliefs. He shows incredible bravery in the face of rejection and danger. But what really sets Lev apart is his capacity for empathy and forgiveness. In a world where everyone's out for blood, Lev's still trying to see the good in people. Lev's presence in the story serves as a powerful counterpoint to all the revenge and violence. He reminds both the characters and the players that there's still room for growth, acceptance, and even innocence in this harsh world. His relationship with Abby shows that bonds can form in the most unlikely places, and that redemption is possible even for those who seem beyond saving. Next, Manny Alvarez, our somewhat evil contender. Now, Manny's an interesting case because he's not your typical bad guy. On the surface, he's charismatic, loyal to his friends, and always ready with a joke or a flirtatious comment. But scratch beneath that charming exterior, and you'll find some actions that push him into morally dubious territory. Manny's unwavering support for the WLF's brutal tactics is where things start to get sketchy. He's all in on their war against the Seraphites, showing little to no remorse for the violence he participates in. Remember that scene where he spits on Joel's corpse? That moment reveals a darker side to Manny, showcasing his capacity for cruelty and disrespect, even towards the dead. But what really cements Manny's place in the somewhat evil tier is his role as an enabler. He's always there, egging Abby on, supporting her quest for revenge without questioning the morality of their actions. His loyalty, while admirable in some contexts, becomes a catalyst for some of the game's most brutal moments. Yet, Manny's not without his redeeming qualities. His genuine care for his friends and his father humanizes him, showing that even those who do bad things aren't entirely evil. It's this complexity that makes him such a compelling character and lands him in the somewhat category rather than full-on villain status. Now, let's shift gears and talk about Maria, our neutral player in this moral chess game. As the leader of Jackson, Maria walks a fine line between maintaining order and preserving humanity in a world gone mad. Maria's neutrality stems from her pragmatic approach to survival. She's not out for revenge or power. Her primary concern is keeping her community safe and functional. This often requires making tough decisions that might not please everyone, but are necessary for the greater good. What's intriguing about Maria is her ability to balance compassion with caution. She welcomes Ellie and Dena into Jackson, providing them a safe haven. At the same time, she's not afraid to call out risky behavior, as we see when she confronts Ellie about her plans for Seattle. Maria's relationship with Tommy adds another layer to her character. She supports him, but isn't afraid to stand her ground when she believes he's making a mistake. This dynamic showcases her strength and independence, traits that serve her well as a leader. In the grand scheme of the game's moral landscape, Maria represents a middle ground. She's not striving for any lofty ideals of saving humanity, nor is she descending into the cycle of violence that consumes so many other characters. Instead, she's focused on the practical, day-to-day challenges of keeping a community alive and as normal as possible in a post-apocalyptic world. Maria's neutrality doesn't mean she's passive or unimportant. On the contrary, her steady presence and level-headed leadership provide a crucial counterpoint to the chaos and violence that dominate much of the game's narrative. She serves as a reminder of what's at stake, the possibility of rebuilding some semblance of normal life amidst the ruins of the old world. Next up, we've got Marlene sliding into the devil tier. Now, this might raise some eyebrows, but hear me out. As the leader of the Fireflies, Marlene's got this whole ends justify the means thing going on, and she takes it to the extreme. She's willing to sacrifice Ellie, a child, for the slim chance of a cure. That's some heavy stuff right there. Marlene's brand of evil isn't the cackling villain type. It's more insidious. She genuinely believes she's doing the right thing, which makes her all the more dangerous. She's charismatic, persuasive, and utterly committed to her cause. This combination makes her a formidable force, willing to cross lines that others wouldn't even approach. What really pushes Marlene into devil territory is the way she manipulates those around her. She uses people's hope for a better world to justify increasingly questionable actions. In her mind, the potential for a cure outweighs any individual life, including Ellie's. It's a cold, calculated approach that disregards the human cost of her decisions. Moving on to Mel, we find her chilling in neutral territory. Mel's an interesting character because she's caught in the middle of all this chaos, just trying to do her job and survive. As a medic, she's dedicated to saving lives, which puts her at odds with the violent world around her. She's not afraid to call out Abby on her obsession with revenge, showing a moral compass that's still intact despite the harsh realities of their world. At the same time, she's not naive. She understands the necessity of violence in certain situations, even if she doesn't revel in it. Mel's pregnancy adds another layer to her character. It represents hope for the future, but also vulnerability in a dangerous world. Her determination to protect her unborn child while still fulfilling her duties to the WLF showcases her strength and resilience. Now, let's talk about Norah, who's landed herself in the evil category. Norah's a tricky one because at first glance, she might not seem as overtly villainous as some other characters. But dig a little deeper, and you'll see why she's earned her spot. Norah's evil stems from her unwavering loyalty to the WLF and her willingness to participate in their most brutal activities. She's not just following orders, she's an active participant in the cycle of violence. Her role in Joel's death and her taunting of Ellie showcase a cruel streak that goes beyond mere survival instinct. Her lack of remorse. Even when faced with the consequences of her actions, she doubles down rather than showing any hint of regret. Her defiance in the face of Ellie's interrogation is chilling, revealing a hardened individual who's fully bought into the WLF's ruthless ideology. Owen, on the other hand, finds himself in the somewhat category. He's a character torn between his loyalty to the WLF and his growing disillusionment with their methods. This internal conflict is what makes Owen such a compelling and morally complex character. On one hand, Owen participates in some pretty questionable acts, including Joel's murder. He's not innocent by any means. But as the story progresses, we see him struggling with the consequences of his actions and trying to find a better path. Owen's desire to leave the WLF and start a new life shows a capacity for change and growth that many other characters lack. His relationship with Mel and his conflicted feelings for Abby add layers to his character, showcasing the human struggles that persist even in a world overrun by infected. Next up, we've got Whitney, another character in the somewhat tier. Whitney's an interesting case because we don't get as much screen time with her compared to some other characters, but what we do see paints a complex picture. As a member of the WLF, Whitney's involved in their violent campaign against the Seraphites. She's not shy about using force and seems to have bought into the WLF's US versus them mentality. This alone pushes her into morally questionable territory. However, Whitney's not entirely without redeeming qualities. Her loyalty to her fellow WLF members, particularly Isaac, shows a capacity for dedication and camaraderie. She's not just a mindless soldier, but someone who believes in the cause she's fighting for, misguided as it may be. What lands Whitney in the somewhat category, rather than full-on evil, is the glimpses we get of her humanity. In her interactions with Abby, we see moments of doubt and questioning, hinting at a more complex individual beneath the tough exterior. Last but not least, we've got Seth hanging out in neutral territory. Seth's an interesting case because he represents the everyday prejudices that persist even in a world overrun by infected. What keeps him in neutral territory is his eventual apology and attempt to make amends. It shows a capacity for growth and learning, even if it's a bit clumsy. Seth's just trying to survive like everyone else. He's not out for revenge or power. He's just a guy running a bar in Jackson, dealing with his own flaws and biases. His neutral status reminds us that even in this harsh world, there's still room for personal growth and redemption. And we are done. What do you think of this list? Let me know in the comments and I'll see you next time. Don't forget to subscribe at all. See ya.